Okay, hey everybody. Welcome to back to the live stream with Basim, Laurie, and Sam, sitting in Basim's living room. And I don't know.
Where do we start?
It's been a really fun experience for me to have Sam and Laurie in Iraq. It's an experience that I have really dreamed about and became reality less than 2 days ago. It's fun. It's really fun.
And Basim knows so much about so many things. So whether it's history or culture, language, people, it's so interesting to be going around with him in this place.
So I think what we'd like to do is take some questions about just about our experiences, and we have some questions. We've obviously had a lot of conversations about Iraq, and so we have some questions for Basim that I'd like to have him respond to. But first, just to start off with some more general philosophical or maybe just reflections about just how interesting the different twists and turns that life can take. And so it's such a kind of a powerful reminder for me as I think back to almost, I guess, a little over 9 years ago when I first did that talk, the TED Talk on empathy. And just watching it begin to take off right now, 9 years ago, so about 3 months after it went out up onto YouTube, and it started to really take off and get a lot of traction here in the Middle East, which is when
I first saw you.
And to think I never would have imagined that here 9 years later I'd be sitting in the living room of an average ordinary Iraqi in an average ordinary living room. Well, not average.
That's you, Basim.
You were average at the time, and of course you're not now. And just I think in so many ways, I think for all of us, for me, that was a stark reminder of how life can just take us into places we never imagined. And for you, Basim, as we walked into your living room, but as I said maybe 20 minutes ago, but it's not your living room. It is, but it's not.
Yeah.
But it is now. And the changes in your life that have occurred that bring us here in this place. Yeah. It is as foreign to you in some ways as it is to us.
Yeah.
So just a moment to sit with that. And how, when I'm with you, and every moment I'm with you is a moment of grace in a way of how you've taken this really awful challenge and turned it into
positive way.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Who would have thought I will less than a year be with you in the United States?
Yeah.
And 8 months later you are here in Iraq.
Yeah. So I think one of the things for, when I hear the announcement last night or yesterday, we read the announcement that what Donald Trump is saying, we're going to pull troops out of Syria. And Secretary of Defense Mattis retiring or quitting, really. And then now he wants to pull half the troops out of Afghanistan. And I think about those are just ideas. And I know Americans are back home or thinking about just the abstractions of that. But those kinds of decisions have such powerful impact for people here. And so, as I was sitting, and then I want to turn this over, but as I was sitting, just laying in bed this morning and thinking about that, and one of the first questions I just wanted to start asking Iraqis was, okay, or my Afghan colleagues, I know Mr. Rashidi, you were watching, but just those are really big decisions for millions upon millions of people, and they impact the lives of so many people. They're not just abstractions, and I think that's one thing that I've really learned more than anything these past 9 years about how things that appear simple are really life-changing for millions.
Yeah, when I read the news about the withdrawal from Syria, I just flashed back to like a year ago. I mean, the United States and the coalition helped the Iraqi forces to get ISIS out of Mosul and the rest of Iraq. And now there are fears that if they pull out of Afghanistan, maybe Iraq will be next. This will be a big thing for people from Mosul. They will be scared that things will turn over again. So I am really worried about that decision.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you know, we're today, and then Laura, I'd like you to weigh in on our conversation yesterday, but just today, one of the places we went this morning, it was raining really hard, and we said, hey, let's go to a shopping mall here. You know, let's just go. We just are really participating today in the lives of average, ordinary Iraqis. You know, you go to the mall and we went to the cemetery and we went to a restaurant and we drove in different neighborhoods. But just walking around the mall thinking, look, all people want here, what they want here is what they want everywhere in the world, which is just normalcy and just to live average, ordinary, normal lives, you know, and people just just people walking around the mall, just shopping and buying gifts and just, you know,
buying. You know, the situation in Mosul after the liberation, I mean, people are not back on their feet yet. They're rebuilding, getting their business running again, and they're optimistic about the future because they lived 3 years. I lived about 1 year, and then I left Mosul. But for people to be scared again about the future, this would be really scary. Yeah.
Mm. So, Laurie, what would you say about the questions you have? Like, for me, maybe say something about our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm thinking it probably is impossible to articulate, but even yesterday we had a conversation with, I would say, our friends and new colleagues who are doing dialogues with us. And we met two of them. I think, what do you have, about 8 to 10 people?
We have a total now about 11. Okay. We have 11 people.
So we got to meet with 2 yesterday, and somehow just in the conversation with them, I was able to feel something that I really have never felt before, which is not just that decisions and actions by these geopolitical forces make a difference in people's lives, but I just felt the potency of just coming out of the experience, like literally. I felt the experience of being underneath, I guess, the oppression of ISIS in them, in their beings. It's nothing I could ever communicate, but I think when I hear about, this most recent decision with Donald Trump, I'm thinking not even about abstract effects, but of just how insecure I would feel. Just like, there's almost the trauma, the re-traumatizing of just the thought that something will change again, and the basic stability that people are just maybe starting to trust again in a second, will go away. But even just thinking that it might would be terrorizing. So I just would have never been able to feel that or imagine how potent that was. And I just was having a conversation, and I feel like I felt that.
You can take it from perspective from like school kids, from business owners, from people who left Mosul and came back to Mosul, from people who are from Mosul still outside thinking of going back to Mosul. So school children and university students, they lost 3 years of their life and their academic life. For people who are working, entrepreneurs who have lost their jobs, they are rebuilding now. And for anything that will shake the confidence in the security of the city, this will be the final blow to the city, I am telling you. For people who are thinking of going back, now they are weary, they say, no, let's hold down, see what will a decision be. I mean, I know we are so far from the United States, but a small decision like this will have a ripple effect, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and everybody would be scared. I mean, ISIS could be back.
Yeah, well, the comment that you made yesterday, you were framing more, and I think a lot of people really don't understand this, but you were framing more about how ISIS has been here for a long time, and then they came and they got pushed back, and they came and they got pushed back, and then suddenly they came in this big major convoy, and we just kind of, somehow it just was allowed to happen. And it didn't just come out of nowhere.
I mean, they traveled all the way from Syria in about like 3 hours to travel, about 300 pickup trucks. I mean, you have the drones on top of that area 24/7. You have satellite images live every day. How were they not being seen, and why were they not stopped before they entered the city?
And
so many questions.
If that happened in that way, then it could so easily happen again.
This would be devastating.
It makes me really, it makes me really in some ways frightened, I think. Hey, I think I want to go to back to that conversation yesterday. I mean, what you had just said about the trauma, right? I mean, there's a way to, I think, stick with this, that I think that, if you can hear that, the children next door, somebody's unhappy about something. It's nice to hear children. I think people just don't, it's really hard to relate to the trauma without being in it. I see it with you. I mean,
I mean, for me, I lived for about a year and a few months, and then I left. But the worst part came after I left. I mean, things got really violent.
There, not worse for you.
No, not for me. For people who were in the city, things got really complicated. ISIS started becoming more aggressive with people. Punishing was harsher. So when the people were yesterday, Ali and Nathan were talking, I mean, I know where they're coming from, but I cannot convey to what they were saying because I did not live it. Many of my friends who lived the liberation of the city, I have some friends in the old city. There were about 15 to 17 members of the 2-3 families. They were stuck in a room, like 3x4, for like, they said, I think for about 70 days. And for them to go to the bathroom, they had to crawl because there was so many bombing and firing and shooting. Just to go to the bathroom was dangerous. So I cannot speak for them, but I can only imagine what kind of terror they were living under.
We were also talking today, somebody made a comment here about, with no separation of church and state, they'll always have major problems and killings. And I think, but that's not really the case. That's not really what's happening here about a separation of church and state. This is about, we were, you were saying, we were just thinking out loud this morning about, this is, this movement of angry young men who were drawn somehow to this ideology of violence and fanaticism. And this can emerge very quickly anywhere in the world. I mean, we could see this easily in the United States. We could see it in so many different people. It has nothing to do with Islam. And in this particular, it has something to do with Islam, obviously, because that's the ideology that they selected or out of which they emerged. But it could just as easily or quickly be an ideology of Buddhism, as we're seeing, or Christianity or Judaism.
But it's not. But not even. I'm saying, but because any ideology becomes a religious orthodoxy at some point.
So a secular ideology. Secular ideology.
So I mean, it's not
it doesn't
compelling. The religious part of it to me isn't as compelling as just being radical about a particular set of ideas.
Just holding fast, which is what so many people in the United States are saying about our sectarianism that's built around political parties at this point.
With one way of seeing, even though there's multiple ways of seeing anything, and no matter what, thinking that your way of seeing is more righteous, more right, more true, more whatever. And I mean, that's the seeds of.
Sure, it's just like all of the anti-war, the people in the United States who identify on the left, who are anti-war, anti-bombing, anti-military, anti-everything, and suddenly Trump says, "Hey, we're going to pull out of Syria," and then they suddenly become pro-war. It's like, how is this? It doesn't. It's almost like we just hide behind this ideology that we create and we fabricate, and then it doesn't take a lot to use that to justify the things. As we're here and we're sort of learn what we've known, but it's just different seeing it firsthand, or hearing it and being in the land. The things that these so-called Islamic fighters could justify doing has nothing to do with any brand of any
Islam.
sort of yeah.
What do you say to that? How do you articulate that?
They came in the name of Islam, but it has nothing to do with Islam.
It has nothing to do even with radical.
No,
it's
extreme radical. Yeah.
Yeah.
The furthest you can go in radicals.
Yeah. So a very conservative or quote radical with a small R Islam, that where you say women have to be covered, and things like this is tiny. This is not
This is I don't know. This is the minutest thing that you can think of. Islam is covering of women. They came up with so many ideas that nobody could think of.
No music, no books, no library.
Like we talked today about in the cemetery, we talked about the headstones, and they broke down every headstone. So if you went to your cemetery and you are a young generation, you don't know who's who.
Yeah. It's different foods that people could and could not. Everything, music and
smoking, music, style of haircuts.
The story they told yesterday about people starting. So only a part of Mosul was really under siege. Part of Mosul, at a certain point, half of Mosul was liberated. So people would tie packets of cigarettes onto balloons.
And just send it. Cigarettes and medicine.
Yeah. And then they would land in somebody's courtyard, and then somebody would have a couple packs of cigarettes.
Which was a fortune then.
Yeah.
If you had a pack of cigarettes, oh boy.
They said you were giving them out 2 at a time.
Yeah, they gave them 2 at a time, and people, if you're addicted to cigarettes, you cannot stop it. Right. So I knew one of my friends, he will light it and he will go the whole day taking 1 or 2 puffs, and then he puts it out, and then just scheduling until he goes in 1 cigarette a day, while he used to smoke like 2 packs a day.
Wow. Yeah. So the things that.
So what were you saying? Why were you saying that?
No, I think it's just the ways in which people kind of respond. All of these extremist ideas, but people will respond to it in some way to say, the kind of resistance.
You mean because it was cigarettes?
Yeah, I think I think I really want to tell that story.
Tell the story
because it's such a normal story, and I think always when there's some kind of extremist ideology, you respond. What was Ali? What did he say? The parable. What was that? The statement about extremism will give rise to its opposite. People will respond.
My nephew, my late nephew Najib, he was whiplashed for wearing jeans and a T-shirt with English writing on it. So they called him, "You are pro-Western." So they took him to one of their headquarters and they gave him 10 whiplashes and they shaved his head.
Wow.
Yeah.
For how long was he with them at that incident?
For an hour. For 1 hour. But they shaved his head and then they gave him 10 whiplashes for just wearing jeans.
How did he respond to that? Because that would be so humiliating.
He came to me and he was in tears. He was humiliated. More than the hurt of the whiplashing, it was humiliation. He was 17 then, and at that age, it will hurt you emotionally more than it hurts you physically.
Yeah.
And he did not leave the house because he had to shave all of his hair, because all they did was shave a little bit of his hair.
Yeah.
So he ended up shaving all of his hair, and he ended up staying home for weeks, not leaving.
Hey, so here's a comment from somebody about Muslims if Muslims want a religious government, ISIS gave them that. And I think this is what we're saying. First off, most Muslims don't want a religious government.
No.
Most Muslims want a secular
government.
It's the same way that most people on the outside see the United States in this sort of rise of evangelical kind of more of radical Christianity, where we see these large populations of Christians who want a religious government. They want Christianity to be wedded to the U.S. Sort of democratic framework, which of course is unconstitutional in the United States. So we have the Establishment Clause of the Constitution that says that the government cannot take any religious position officially and cannot stand behind any particular religious ideology. And I think a lot of Christians in the United States don't understand that doing that would be unconstitutional. But in the same way that we have a lot of Christians who want that, the vast majority of Americans really want a separation of church and state. And that's my understanding or my reading of Islamic countries.
We want the same. I mean, in Iraq, we never had a religious power being held. Like when the first, in 2003, we had some religious parties like Islamic, and they came in the name of the religion. But two elections later, they failed miserably because they just did not want clerics to rule you.
Yeah. I think I don't think in the world today we really kind of see that anyway.
But what you're saying is it's easy to see it from the outside and come up with a simple idea like that.
Yeah,
similarly,
exactly.
people from the outside see the U.S. in that way.
Sure.
In similar ways.
Sure. And when I'm in Islamic countries, when I'm in Muslim countries, like here, right? As 99.9% of people's lives.
That's a study.
Okay.
That's statistics.
All right, 99.87%. It's just like people aren't living their lives according to Islam has such a tiny impact on people's lives. And if you like just living, you come here, you walk down the street, you're in restaurants, you're driving your car, you're working, you're this, you're that. It's like it's no different. I would have, if I didn't hear the call to prayer, which we just heard, not just a little bit ago, I'd have no idea I was in a Muslim country, and so it doesn't matter. Life here is exactly like life back home. The restaurants are different, the writing on the storefronts are a little different, but honestly, the same stores or the same kinds of stores, people living their lives exactly the same way. It's just like nothing denotes the differences.
Nothing significant.
You'd have to be in Muslim countries to understand Muslims are the same as Christians in almost every single ordinary sociological way. And I know it's just so.
When he says that, what do you think?
I was going to ask him, but he talked about it. I mean, I was going to ask him, what was your expectation? Mm-hmm. What did you see, and how far your expectation was apart from what you saw? And he answered it before. I was going to ask him.
I feel it's just immensely safe.
Yeah.
We were talking about gun violence, and a lot of your friends
were
saying, "Do you really want to go to the United States? You're going to get killed."
Mm-hmm. I mean, I told Sam, you are safe 1,000%, not 100%. I mean, you can just go walk down the street at 3 a.m. and you will be totally safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
why is that?
We are not violent people. Yeah. I mean, you rarely hear of a violent crime, especially here in Erbil. Mm-hmm. You don't hear of a violent crime. I mean, you have crimes of passion. Mm-hmm. You hear crimes of reprisal. This is the only thing. And the guy will just go surrender himself to the police station. And that's it. I mean, robbery is very rare.
I haven't seen any police here.
Did you see any police cars?
I've not seen a single police.
No, there's no police cars.
And I wish there were some highway patrol cars, because people are driving like maniacs, including this guy right here. But no, actually, you're a very good driver. Very calm. But it's just really.
We have speed cams, so you will pay for the speed later.
Yeah,
we have speed cams all over.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and here there hasn't been that much traffic. Certainly not today.
Yes, Friday.
It's a week.
Yeah, it's Friday, and it's been raining for 2 days.
Yeah.
You know, it's so weird though, just having this conversation because, I mean, I'm also shaped by the news and the culture, just like everybody else is. So whenever I hear the news or have for my whole life heard news about the Middle East or this place or that place or even New York, you know, I grew up right there, but just all these things are scary. Everything is scary. Every place
Very
is
scary, yeah.
And then I come to these places, every place that I've been scared of, and I'm not seeing what I'm supposed to be afraid of. And so and yet I feel like if I was the Laurie that hadn't had those experiences and I was listening to myself talk, I just wouldn't believe me.
Exactly.
Because it's so crazy making to think that the world isn't what we think it is. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like we're having this conversation and it seems ridiculous.
Well, it's a little, but it is in some ways, right? Different. Well, here, when we were at the mall today, I really wanted to just walk around, even just when we were taking a walk in town, and I just wanted to have my video camera and just video like people's shoes and their clothes. How much time? So now we're once again average, ordinary Iraqis, right? How much time people spend on their clothing and ironing their clothes and their hair, and men on their hair, and all these people.
Everybody's
who we're supposed to be afraid of, and I think, my God, you have no time to be violent because you're busy going to the barber shop and like trimming your beard and like.
He has something with barber shops.
I know he totally does.
Well, they're everywhere here. And I keep wanting to go to a Turkish barber.
You know, when we were getting on the plane the other night, and I'm saying this because somehow I think that if we even have the possible belief that the world isn't exactly as we've been told it is, and we might then seek other information, it might be a good thing. But when I was sitting on the plane on the way to, as people were getting on the plane on our last leg when we were coming to Reveal, and I was watching people come on as you always do. Who's that person? Who's this person? Who's that? And I said to Sam, I leaned over and I said, "Hey, Sam, these are our enemies." And
we were surrounded by them.
Mostly people from Iraq, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how crazy is it that I'm supposed to be afraid of this dad and this mom and this grandmother and this whatever. And I know no one. It just sounds even crazy to say it, but it's just one of those moments in time where you just think the world is crazy because we're all just here.
Yeah. I think that's
I don't know. It's almost not there.
We can beat this to death. We don't have to go any further. It is really.
Stereotyping is a killer.
Yeah. Hey, let's see if we have any. Does anybody have any questions? Let me see. Yeah, does anybody have a question they would like to ask or they have of us? Maybe we could. Let me throw it out.
In the meantime,
yes.
I wanted to say that one thing of the conversation we were having yesterday, besides just feeling a little bit of the experiences post-conflict, you might say, or post-ISIS, was just for me the interest. We talked about this a little bit today, but the interest in conversation, which seems just kind of lame and limp to think of conversation when you think of like such profound violence and oppression and all these terrible things that have happened. But then to have our colleagues saying to us how hungry they are and the young people around them are just to talk and to tell their stories and to hear other people and to connect with people in other parts of the world. And that was really, here's that word again, it was very impressionante for me, because it just seems like in some ways the last thing I would imagine actually as a response to the that kind of experience, right? But then at the same time, one thing that I do know is, when you're traumatized, when you've had these experiences that are just incredible and terrorizing, there is this human desire to tell, to share, to work through, to tell the stories and be heard and be received, right? So it's shouldn't be surprising, but it feels somehow paradoxical to think that there could be any way that matters. I don't know how you.
Well, I think about our friends and colleagues in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Similarly surprising to me.
Yeah, how hungry people are to reach out, and I think similarly for so many Americans, how hungry Americans are to know somebody. We have most Iraqis are here. This is me. I'm going to be a sociologist now again. But most Iraqis.
He's going to stereotype.
I'm going to stereotype. I know I'm going to generalize, but I have to say most Iraqis are really not that hungry. Most Iraqis are busy living their lives, right? They're making meals and taking care of their kids. And Basim, you were telling us the story of having your granddaughter here in the house and how you had to child-proof the living room. And most Iraqis are busy child-proofing their living rooms if they have a 7-month-old or whatever. Some are really hungry for the other, but so similar to Americans, some Americans are really hungry to travel, to talk to people. Very few Americans, if given the choice, you say, hey, do you want to go to Mexico and be a tourist for 7 days, or would you like to go for 6 days and take 1 day and go to a non-touristy area and just kind of see how average, ordinary Mexicans live, go to that kind of restaurant? Most Americans, I have to think, would say, yeah, I'll take 6 days there and I'll take 1 day, just kind of seeing something a little different. Americans are going to have a certain curiosity, but most people are still going to say, yeah, but give me my 6 days in the resort or whatever. And that's going to be true with most Iraqis. Some Americans are going to say, no, I want 6 days experiencing the real Mexico, and I'll take 1 day, hanging out at the swimming pool in the resort, right?
You would take the opposite.
I would take the opposite. I would take all 7 days. But I think that's probably how, most Afghans are not really hungry all the time. Some are really, really hungry. Same with Iraqis, Syrians, wherever we go in different zones. But it's probably the same proportion of people everywhere in the world. So there's nothing really unique.
So go ahead, Basim.
I feel the internet has changed a lot of perspective of young children, kids. One of the school we have in the dialogue, she speaks perfect English, and she told me that she has learned her English from the internet and watching TVs. I have a friend of mine, Muhammad, whose daughter is in her first year college, and when I went visiting him, I spoke to her in English, and I was amazed by her English, and I said, where did you learn? She said, from internet, from TV, from watching foreign language movies and not reading the subtitles.
Yeah.
So the internet has brought the cultures closer. And if you are eager to learn, you can teach yourself and you can go beyond. Let's talk about cooking.
Wait, before you do, let me just ask you one more question on that. So some people would say that the cultures aren't coming together, that they're being more dominated by the West. And so how come people in the West aren't learning Persian or Arabic or Mandarin or whatever? Like what maybe you see it differently, maybe that you see this exchange?
Well, let's be honest. For an English language, it's an international language more than Arabic is. But I know of one American, a journalist, he's taking language courses in Arabic. And every time we were together like 2 days ago, and every time he sees a word that he's not sure, he say, Basim, what is this? I said, listen, if you need any help in Arabic, just text me. Because Arabic is very powerful language. For one word, it can have many different meanings depending on the syntax of the sentence. There are a lot of people who are learning Arabic now, just like many people are learning Chinese, Japanese, because China is now, let's be honest, China is a growing power. Many people are, I know of many Iraqis who have set up business in China and they are learning Chinese.
So you are seeing?
Yeah, I am seeing. So the language, we have a saying in Arabic, if you want to be safe against your enemy, you have to learn his language. من تعلم لغة قوم أمن شرهم. If you learn the language of your enemy, you are safe.
Yeah.
So language breaks barriers. I've had
Absolutely.
many encounters, many stories,
Absolutely.
and the language saved me.
Was the key.
Was the key.
Hey, one of the question that somebody asked on the stream, why don't people who live here in Iraq, try to take their, or in certain countries, try to take the countries back? Like, why don't people living here in Iraq try to take Iraq back, right?
Back from?
I guess maybe radical ideology or whatever. And I was thinking, well, I'm thinking as a sociologist, how many Americans are saying we have to take America back? But what are they doing? They selected this person who's really, the Donald Trump kind of character, who's not the character who's going to give power to the people, but it's actually an anti-democratizing process, right? It's taking power away from the masses of people and continuing to put it in the hands of small numbers of people. And so I think about the Democrats and Republicans. It's like, how do you take power back from them? They represent the elite. These sort of party, these political parties that are just like these parties of power that have been put in place to represent the elite. And I think, well, the Trumpism process is the same thing. And I think, well, that's true here.
Yeah.
So you're saying the masses of people can't feasibly take
you can't.
power?
Taking power is it's a euphemism, right? It's like democracy doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Democracy is not a thing. It's an idea. It's an
ideal type.
It's an ideal type. You can only be more democratic or less democratic, but there's no such thing as democracy in the purest sense. It means it's not possible. Because democracy means power to the people, and that would be, how do you give people power? You can't. You have to. It's just systematically impossible. You have to elect leaders to represent those people, and once you elect leaders, the first thing those leaders do is try to get reelected. So then they try to coalesce, bring their power together, and then they work with each other to hold on to that power so they can be reelected, so they can have access to the goods. And then that's a completely anti-democratic process. So, well, the same is happening here. So we passed the.
I can add to that.
Yeah.
2003, we have a new regime in Iraq. I myself participated in every election, thinking that I would be able to change, I would be able to bring the right person to the right place. But in every election, I was not doing. I said next time I'm not going, but I went to the election, hoping that we will have a better system. But so I will elect one person and some other parties come into play, and the person I elect is not in power. Manipulation. All the parties, they manipulate the votes, and at the end you end up with the same face. So we are three people. One day you are in this chair, next day you are here, the next day I'm here. We only switch
around.
We switch around, and we are governing the people. So the last election, I was in the United States, and that was the first time I did not participate in an election. People are not participating in elections anymore because they know it's a waste of time.
Well, this is sort of in the United States. It's a similar thing. And so even if your person had won, It wouldn't matter. They wouldn't represent,
Exactly.
that person wouldn't represent you.
The same
right?
thing here.
They're going to represent power and interest. And I think that's what somehow Americans now, there's a certain group of Americans, just like a certain group of Americans thought that Barack Obama was going to represent a unique constituency of Americans. Now people are thinking, hey, we've got this guy, Donald Trump, who's going to represent the real Americans, and he represents a small constituency, right? So this is the nature of power. And I think that somehow on the outside, it's easy to critique other nations for not getting it right, and harder to just look in the mirror and even see our own nation for all the ways in which the same things happen in countries really around the world.
Yeah, I think democracy is a word that they play with it.
Yeah, I think it's we play. It's actually also a really good way to hold the people in check, because the people can argue about things like democracy and not really seek ways to disperse power more equitably around or across social and political and economic systems. And I see the same thing here in Iraq that I see at home, really, from a deep sociological level. This goes back to how we started the conversation. I don't.
Finish your sentence. I'm just looking at the
Yeah, go ahead. I'm not.
I'm wondering what this.
Let me switch screens here. So a comment just said like 80% of Muslims would be okay with, I'm not like, maybe not an ISIS rule, but oh, what the heck? It completely. Why is no audio going through?
Your audio?
But mine isn't.
In the meantime, can we ask a question? Lisa's. I also want to go back to
can you go
Emma's
ahead?
question too. So Lisa is saying, speaking on power, she sees in the U.S. a huge amount of powerlessness by contrast, and it's fueling so much fear. In what ways does that play out in Iraq? The powerlessness and fear, kind of a loop. If so.
The democracy, when it came to Iraq, democracy is a long process.
Yeah, so democracy didn't come.
Democracy was
Democratic
imposed
process
on us.
Yeah.
Very, very few knew what democracy is. For us, democracy was associated with lawlessness, with doing anything you feel like in the name of democracy. This is not democracy.
Mm-hmm.
I've argued about this point many times with my friends. Democracy has to be taught to the first generation in kindergarten now. So when they grow up, they know the definition of democracy. Democracy does not mean that you can do anything you want, regardless. You live in a community, the rules of the community are above everybody. So that's my understanding of democracy. So I cannot just go and do anything I want and please. The problem in Iraq, this is what happened in 2003. Let's say students in Iraq, you have the final exam. So if you flunk, the students will go on, start looting the school, go on strike, start shouting, we want a makeup exam. And they give them a makeup exam. And then let's say out of 100% pass from the first exam, 60 pass, they have 40%. On the second exam, only 20%. You have a 20% fail. They will start shouting and they will go on strike. And we want another makeup exam. In Iraq, now we have 3 makeup exams. In my opinion, this is not democracy, one. Second, this is a destruction to the process of education.
Mm-hmm.
This is a destruction.
Well, we see this in the United States. We see a similar kind of thing.
What makes that connected to powerlessness and fear? Like, do you see?
It's not powerlessness. It's thinking that democracy will give you the right to do anything you want, and you take the right of the person in front of you in the name of democracy.
So it's like rampant individualism or intense individualism.
Yeah, that's what's happening now.
Yeah.
Not like the rule of the by the people.
No.
Well, also you need, and that this Mohit Sharma asked a question I'm going to respond to about India. You also have, you need, for, again, this is democracy as an ideal type, not as something that exists, right? But as something that you strive for, but you never actually arrive at. But the striving, what requires for the striving, the process to play itself out in a relatively peaceful way is strong bureaucratic institutions and lots of rules and kind of structures to hold the systems in place so that, for example, the students wouldn't think that they can do that, or they can do it in certain situations when the pendulum swings too far this way. It's incumbent upon the students to protest to sort of move it back to the center. You know, maybe the university comes and says, hey, we're going to change this now, and we're going to have one exam and only 10% of students can pass instead of 30, which has been the case for the past 4 years. And then the students have to rise up and sort of push the pendulum back. You know, but the idea that, you know, in a new system with where, you know, deep rule structures are not in place, it's, you know, random groupings of people are going to start rising up and protesting different things. And then the system gets really out of whack, which sounds like, you know, would have happened in that case.
You know, when we talk about lawlessness, I mean, in 2003, when all the police force, the army were dismantled.
Yeah.
We lived for about 3 months. I did not see a policeman in the street. Now, if we go to another country, we did not have any looting. What happened was the government building were looted. Anybody who worked for Saddam, his house was looted. But nobody went into my shop and stole what I have.
Yeah.
Nobody did that. If we go for like in the United States, when you have a hurricane, everybody would go in and break into shops and steal.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So what was the system or the structure in place here that
I think people have self-righteousness that I should not do this. We did not have any case of looting of personal shops.
Wow, that's so fascinating.
Never.
Yeah, we have that all the time. You know, we have looting. People, I don't know, a sports team wins the championship or they lose the championship. And, you know, fans can loot and bust into stores and steal things.
No, is it an act of defiance or because the people are poor and they want to steal things? What do you make?
Well, I think it's mostly not poor. In those situations, it's mostly not poor people. It's just people losing their minds. But this case is really fascinating. So government, and I remember that time in 2003, right? So you're saying that government buildings were looted, vandalized.
Saddam's palaces were vandalized.
And the houses of the Saddam supporters and high-ranking supporters were often looted and so on, but not average places.
I can vow never.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. So what is, and this is the thing, you know, this is my point about having to be in a place like this, and, you know, it's just another country. It doesn't matter, because we have a similar thing when we're in Haiti or, you know, wherever we are, right? Colombia, it doesn't matter. You have to be on the ground. You have to feel it. You have to really engage in the sort of the deep knowing of certain cultural structures and ways of being, to see these kinds of things. And then that's how, you know, that's how I've learned about my own culture, is by coming to other cultures. And I learn more about the United States. Yeah, so here, this Mohit is asking, I'm from India, and I just want to know why there is so much dispute between Muslims and Hindus in India. And my response to that question is, well, I was in India twice. I didn't see any dispute between Muslims and Hindus. Actually, what I saw was just an immense amount of coexistence. Coexistence. And
but according to Hindus and Muslims, I mean, but
no, I'm going to respond. I'm going to keep responding. So, but what I saw was dispute between extremist views on one end and extreme people on the other end, and mostly even those extremists, people with more extremist views, mostly they were held in check or are held in check until certain moments when it just like the fire gets turned up, maybe by a leader who just for whatever reason, as we see right now, we're seeing this in India with, some of the more extremist Hindu political parties where everything is fine, but then these political leaders go out and they start creating all this havoc in the street. And just recently, it happened a couple weeks ago with some more extremist Hindu leaders, and they suddenly, you have 30,000, 40,000 people in the streets, and they're starting to demand things. And I said, just shut up. If you just shut up, if this person wasn't talking, none of these people would just be busy with their lives, selling things on the street and driving their taxis, and like they wouldn't. But anybody can whip people up, which is what we see with Donald Trump. People are just living life, and then they go to these Trump rallies, and they're just going to a Trump rally, and then suddenly Donald Trump is just talking all this crazy stuff, and people start getting screaming, and then then they leave the rally with all this emotions. Then I think, dude, just hold that stuff in check. So I think that when we make a statement like that, so much dispute between Muslims in India, Mohit, I'm responding to you, there isn't so much dispute. It's quite localized. And look, I've only been there twice. You're from India. I don't live there, but I know if I went there and walked around the whole country and visited the whole country, what I'm going to see is average, ordinary Indians, whether they're Muslims or Hindus, living their lives for 99.9% of the time. That's all they're doing.
One thing on that, we were going through a neighborhood here, and actually, it was the neighborhood that we're staying in because it's a more Christian neighborhood. And you were mentioning as we were driving by that something of like how much tension there is, or in one of the communities. It doesn't matter the detail actually, but I had that experience of where when you're not from the place, and so in these moments I'm watching like, where's the tension, where's the fighting, like how would I know this, or right? And so on one level it's because I don't know, because I'm not having the experiences, I don't live here. And on the other hand, it's like, well, at a certain level, it's really not present because it's only present in certain moments.
Yeah.
Not if you don't feel it. It's just it's what I'm saying is there's things that happen in the world, and then they become and they can happen in a patterned way, and then it becomes like the stories that we tell each other. And I'm not saying, and those things then create more conflict, and then the stories create more conflict on top of it.
Oppression causes extremism. So, and to serve a certain purpose of a group of people.
The extremism, you mean?
It's one of the ingredients of extremism.
Exactly.
It's not the cause.
It's not the cause.
Yeah.
So, like now in China, Muslims are in some part of China, they're being so oppressed. In Myanmar.
Yeah.
So this fuels extremism. I did not say just create, it fuels it. So you come to a group of ignorant people, somebody else thinks for them, and you come to them and say, listen, they're doing this and this and that for our brothers in certain country. Go fight, go for jihad in that country to save the people of that country.
Which is where ISIS comes from.
That's exactly,
right?
Exactly what happened. A bunch of fanatic, crazy people were grouped and pushed here.
Yeah, which held in check or just would just not be. But I know of my colleagues who study all of these people who became ISIS fighters. And they see there are just certain profiles of the majority of people, and the profile is someone who's really lost and jobless. And I mean, there's another profile of a small percentage, small but significant, who's more highly educated, but still not people who are deeply embedded into their lives. I want to go back to what you said when we were driving away this morning, and you said that your friend was in this neighborhood. Your friend who is Muslim, was trying to rent a shop and a space for a shop. And they got all the way down to the contract.
And when they found that he was a Muslim, they canceled the contract.
But life and the economy in your bill now, that's when the economy was really humming.
Flourishing, yeah.
Flourishing. And now it's, things are really tough here. So you're saying, but now you could probably rent them.
Exactly.
So I'm like, okay, wait, hang on. So now you have all this discrimination here at this point in time, but it shifts. And now we don't see it. We're going to see less discrimination if we see it. Well, you're going to see some, right? There'll be some kind of backlash. But I think this is what I mean. If I only pick it out in one point, and this is how quickly things turn and how quickly they can, just reality can turn.
Exactly. Like watching Subway of New York on TV, you get the opinion of it's so dangerous. When I went to New York, I was afraid to ride the subway, but when I was on the subway, that's all I used.
Right.
Yeah.
You were just looking around and you were like, who am I to be afraid of in this subway?
Yeah.
You don't.
But I think I hate to go to this basic level, but it just reminds me of, it almost is like we all have just a little telescope on the world, and we can only ever see what's here in our telescope, and we're asking people all the time, what do you see through your telescope so that I can see more than what is right here? And it goes back to the same thing. Nobody can see the whole, right? So how do you trust what's true? And oftentimes, we have people telling us things who have interests in us believing certain things, whether they're religious leaders, government leaders, whatever, our parents who want us to do certain things in certain ways. And so, people aren't exactly telling you what's in their telescope, right? Because it's all about beliefs. And so you just get we all just have a really limited view of the world, and it's hard to know what's true. It's hard to know what's true. And we're all just saying, like, can I be safe? Can I trust you? Can I trust those people?
Yeah, just like when you said we were on the plane and said, oh, my enemies, what am I doing with them?
Surrounded by them. Yeah. I thought she was.
No, he thought I was serious.
And she pointed more behind me, and I thought she was really literally saying it because we wanted to get off the plane quickly when we landed. So we wanted to get our bags, stand up quickly, get our bags, and
run away.
Line up. And she's like, those people back there, Sam, I thought she was saying they're our enemies because they're going to try and get in front of us. So remember, when the plane lands,
act like you're from New Jersey.
Elbow, they're your enemies. Beat them off the plane. But she was being really serious.
I was being sarcastic.
Going with what you said, Laurie. I make a lot of what's probably are fairly sound like generalizations. I mean, I know that they're all generalizations, but I'm not an expert on Iraq, right? I'm not an expert on anything. I'm not an expert on the United States. I'm not an expert on my own life, but what I am is a person who can see the world and has trained myself to see the world through average, ordinary citizens everywhere I go in the world. And when I see, often it's the same thing. And now maybe I'm only just seeing my own life, but I feel like I'm actually, I experience the world the same way wherever I go, in whoever shoes I'm walking, and we're all largely the same.
But I think there's one more thing that I think this is what I hear you trying to articulate, and it's one thing to say we're all the same. People will want to say, "Oh, Sam, don't say that," because we have to, honor all the ways in which we have differences, right? So there's like, "Ooh, you're not allowed to say that," but you can, in the sense that we're just doing the basic things. But I think the thing that you're always talking about and seeing is that life gets on in a pretty patterned way in most parts of the world most of the time. And there are places and times where there's horrifying things, there's violence, there's all these kinds of things. But that doesn't define most of the world most of the time, right? Yeah. But we hear about those things because they're the most horrifying and they're the things that we least want to see happen. And so we talk about them and we try to figure them out, and we usually can't figure it out. But I just hear you saying, like, I'm just this person who sees, when I just look at the surface, so to speak, that we all share. We're pretty much, we're following a lot of the rules, and, of treating each other with basic decency. But there's plenty of ways that people aren't, but we hear about those.
We hear
like
about
we
those.
don't mostly
Well-
pay attention to, hey, or we stop at the stop sign and I let
There's certain common ground levels that we all share.
Mhm.
It just depends what's your priority from my priority, but we all share the same. We all feel the same thing. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy. What makes you sad makes me sad. So we have common grounds.
And so what's interesting about that, like, which seems like a pretty boring idea,
Yeah.
which is probably why it's not one anyone talks about too much, because it's boring. No one, you can just turn off the live stream right now because it's kind of boring. But I think that there's a seed in there, which is, like you said, there's just like some little differences in our priorities. And this is why I'm getting to the point of like, if we just think together, then let's think together. So you can have a different priority than me, but then could we just figure out how to actually do something about those different priorities together? You know what I mean? Because I don't.
Well, yeah.
No.
Well, that's your work.
Yeah, and I think it's not like we just have to see that we're different and hold those differences to be so utterly important. It's like, good, we're different, good, we're the same. Let's just actually think together about the world and try and create a world that.
And that's the process of democracy.
Yeah.
As a verb, democratizing the world is that.
That's what the conversation is all about.
Yeah.
But it's the hard work, because it means that you give up as much as you ask for. If you're doing it right, you give up as much as you ask for from another person. Most of us don't ask for a lot, because most of us are just busy trying to get through our day-to-day lives. But we have to generally give up as much. It's like driving. Every time I'm behind someone who's annoying me, I recognize that I'm annoying the person behind me. I always think that. So I'm like, well, that's I'm giving up something, but I'm gaining something. It's that kind of thing.
The thing that because when I get to this set of thoughts about people thinking together, it also then takes me to something that I struggle deeply with, which is that we talk a lot about ordinary people and cultural differences and similarities and all this, but it's really hard to talk about, and we were touching on this a little bit today. It's sort of geopolitics, but it's people who have obscene amounts of power to make decisions based on their own egos and make decisions that affect profound numbers of people, which maybe arbitrary for arbitrary reasons, that we're like, why did this person, why is that we can't actually talk about democracy, that we're controlled, our lives are controlled so profoundly by these, individual decisions that are made by people or groups in power, right? So
Exactly.
Yeah, see it in Iraq. You see it in the US.
It's everywhere. No, so there's a layer of humanity.
It's a false democracy, really false democracy, because the few are governing the majority. Everywhere.
And so
to a certain extent, of course.
Great, different.
To a certain extent.
Right. But I think even to say to a certain extent for me isn't as important as recognizing there is a class of people who have so much power and who need a lot of help in making decisions, thinking about their own interests and how those impact in such deep ways the rest of the world, and so in some, I don't know, maybe I just want to start doing therapy for the people who rule the world. And I know that sounds crazy, but I don't think we can realize our own, talk about powerlessness and power without realizing how much we are controlled by human forces beyond us.
Hey, so I have a question actually that maybe we could talk about this. Sam Key too asked this question: is any affirmative action being taken by the Iraqi government toward the extremists? And I think I'm not exactly sure what it's a cool question. It's too vague. It's too vague. If you could ask it more specific. But I actually have a thought on that. One of the issues with the extremists. I was asking you about this. I read the article, I think it was either in the New York Times or the Washington Post, about so many people who are now in and around Mosul who have been identified as supporting ISIS while they were here.
Or being ISIS.
Or being ISIS. And so many people being arrested, being imprisoned, and being tried really without recourse to lawyers and democratic processes. I mean, some trials are 4 minutes long. And how one of the things that we see in countries without deep structures of bureaucracy, deep legal structures that produce, that they create a complex web of rules that shape human behavior. Like, you can do it this way, but you can't do it this way, right? And there's a reason you do it this way. You follow a certain number of steps, right? And so the problem that we see, one of the problems we see here are right now is that, well, you're trying to build a society based on civic legal structures, right? But there's not enough deeply embedded rules in place. So you have things like this, like these former ISIS fighters that are not, or former ISIS, maybe supporters, maybe not, who don't get a fair shake at
Yeah, Sam, what happened was, you live in a neighborhood, and one person, he was a member of ISIS. So you go to the local police or whoever is in charge of your area, and you tell, listen, X person, well, I know he was a person of ISIS.
Or supported them.
So they moved so quickly. If they did not take action swiftly, the guy would be gone in a day. So I am sure there were some people who were arrested. They were not ISIS, but the majority were ISIS. People were so afraid of them coming back. The people of Mosul before, they were afraid to say this person was ISIS because there were reprisals against them.
Right.
After the liberation of the city, everybody said, I have nothing to lose. We have lost everything. It's now a matter of me or them. My life or their life. My city, me taking it back or losing it to them forever. So I know a friend of mine, he's in the police force, and he said, our phone does not stop ringing with people saying, this person is in this location right now, this person is this location, right? Come get him. Some people were arrested by mistake because we have the system of 2 witnesses. If 2 witnesses say this guy is ISIS, the guy will be arrested. Sometimes they were not truthful.
Yeah, well, you have to. Absolutely.
You have to have checks and balances.
Yeah.
But we were in such a hurry. To get those people that I know some people were not ISIS and they were arrested. They were let off after. They were checked.
And certainly it has to be the case that some people who are not ISIS have been arrested and have been imprisoned, found guilty.
But can I ask first, like, what would it mean to be a supporter of ISIS? Like, what would be the things that people would notice to say, oh, they supported ISIS?
Okay, some of them, they wore their attire. So when you wear their attire, the Afghan uniform, you were ISIS, you're labeled ISIS.
Okay.
So
and they didn't demand that people dressed a certain. I mean, I know they.
No, they did not.
Okay, so
I mean, if you were dressed in this uniform, you're 100%.
Because you chose that.
You chose that.
Okay, so that's
they did not force you to wear it. They did not force people to wear it.
Okay.
They forced people to cut their pants short, to grow beards, not to wear a tie. This kind of.
Right.
But they did not force people to wear Afghani.
Okay,
but
so
if you wore it, you are 100%. Heart and mind, you are with them.
Okay.
So
what else would there be that would say that people would have said, oh, that's ISIS, they're supporting ISIS?
Some of them worked 100% with them. Some helped them, give the information about other people. They say this guy is selling cigarettes.
Okay.
Because cigarettes were banned.
Yeah.
Very small details, but the people were living in this neighborhood.
everybody is watching everybody
Mhm.
because it was a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would people in some ways, would there be cases where people were forced on some level to support them or give them information for their own protection or the protection of their family? You know, that then in the future, now
It
people
would
would
look
say
like
they supported them, but they were only trying to survive.
Some of them, they became with them, but not 100%. But it's a non-return path. If you go in, you cannot come out.
Based on
I don't know, this is their mentality. Once you are joining them, you cannot retrieve. That's it.
Okay.
You're ISIS.
Mhm.
So many people, whether being uneducated, whether they believed in what ISIS mentality, whether, I know some kids, they were so happy to wear Afghani and carry a gun. It gave them some sense of power over people. But then later they regretted doing it. And they said, what did we do? They were just, there were many small kids. They were kids.
Yeah,
You can see 11, 12, 13 years old kids wearing a gun.
Yeah.
Just their mentality.
Yeah. That's what I think that's what I think, you know, if you don't read have a deep understanding of what it is, right, and can compare this to other examples of a similar kind of thing happening in other parts of the world at different times, including in the United States, maybe during the Civil War as an example, or being on one side or another of protest movements, right? I think that people don't really understand that so many people who become part of these radical movements are just people searching for some kind of meaning. They're not thinking about the complex issues involved. I think about, I remember my colleague and friend Rafi Nadidi in Afghanistan told the story of, this woman who was killed by a mob of people who, because somebody claimed that they saw her burn the Quran. So this mob of people attacked and killed her, right? And the person who made the proclamation was this man who people came to for sayings from the Quran, prayers and sayings, right? They were on little strips of paper, and then he would hand them out to people for a little price or something, right? But he himself was illiterate. He didn't even know what the strips of paper meant, and so all these, I just think like this kind of thing, these people would follow this person who's illiterate, who really doesn't know and stuff, and just how crazy it is that, that this happens. Or I listen in the United States to these sometimes television ministers, right? Who, just a perfect example of this person's on television with a suit and a coat, holding the Bible up saying, God just told me that he wants you to give me $30 million so I can buy a new jet airplane so that I can travel around the world more quickly to minister to souls. And any Christian who would think that God spoke to that guy and said, I want you to have a $30 million airplane. You already have a $10 million airplane, but I need you to fly faster. So anybody who would do that is just like, is insane. Would be in the diagnostic and statistical manual, would be on page 136, a sign of complete mental illness, right?
There's so many of them.
There's so many.
It sounds
so
like you're making that up.
No, it's true. And so when you say that there are these young men who are 13, 14, 15 years old who are completely powerless, we see, maybe living on the street and they're saying, and these young kids join, why wouldn't you? Which the same thing would happen in the United States. We would have so many people joining a movement like that, as we do, in this movement called the alt-right that we see. Yeah, if you're going to give money to a television minister to buy a new airplane, you certainly would join a radical fringe Christian movement that was out to, destroy atheism. That was being organized to fight the atheists, the godless atheists.
One day I saw a Tibetan ISIS. I was in a shopping for grocery, and this guy was in front of me paying. I just thought to myself, what is this guy coming all the way from Tibet to Mosul doing? What brought him here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tibetan, all the way from the Himalaya coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we at with time?
Hey, I just want to respond to this person who's on the stream, this Lauren Kelly, who just I think is responding to something I said, but then ends her statement with something about Muslim countries is wrong on an infrastructural level, and I would say to you, Lauren, well, you've never been in a Muslim country, I'm assuming, and you haven't studied at any even superficial level. By that I mean, read quite a number of books and talked to quite a number of people and so on, Muslim countries. So that's the kind of statement that you can't say that statement. You just can't make it.
Well, maybe the only
I don't even know.
Maybe the only thing that's wrong with that is just that it's because I think what you were saying was you were talking about the infrastructural level, right? Like something, one, but just because of the urgency needed or because of the potency of the situation, like the protocols are not deeply in place. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what she's talking about. She's like saying, see, that's what I mean. I just don't know that it's unique to Muslim countries. I think that's not
unique to Muslim countries.
I just think that it's really funny because everywhere we go in the world, and then back in the US, people say the same thing, but in a different way. It always is pointing to corruption. See, it's corruption that makes this legal system not work, or this election system not work, or this thing not work, no matter where I go.
Well,
people in their own countries are like, see that, and basically, Lauren, it would be like the infrastructure is really not working. So that would be my only disagreement with you, is that I don't think the Muslims have any like corner on the market, but I don't know. So I see what you're saying. It definitely is an infrastructural problem.
Well, for us, it's too many laws, right? I mean, in some ways, and then it becomes
and also the laws only applying to certain people at certain times for certain, infringements on the law. So I would call that an infrastructural problem too.
Come over, Lauren, and I'll make you change your mind.
I can take her to that restaurant. We just ate at today. You also put on about 10 pounds if you eat over here for a week, because food's pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think about so many other countries.
Thanks, Lauren. She said I was right.
Okay.
Well, no, things do get better. I think this is the point. Like here in Iraq, right? Things they've gone up and down. I mean, you've lived, in your 58 years, 58, 59,
50,
going on 59.
Going on to 59 next February.
Yeah. So what's really fascinating, that as we've been talking about the different periods and so on, it's like, better, worse, better, worse, better, worse. And I think, well, that's the same thing Americans say, like, otherwise Trump wouldn't be elected. Let's make America great again. Like, okay, well, it was great at some point in the past, and then it got not great. Then it got great again, not great. And I just think that's like,
well, it's also one of those life questions, right? If you just did this about like a nation, like the history of a nation, but if you do it about the history of a person, it's the same thing. Our lives do this, and so then you start to get to really deep existential questions. Is that just the nature of life itself, right? We don't need to go there.
And is it the nature of most every country? This is the thing.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Life itself.
Yeah. So, and that's a real question, which we could keep talking about, but we won't probably. Listen, I don't know what our timeline is.
So we'll just keep going a little bit more. But Laurie, earlier you talked about how much power a small number of people have and how decisions they make profoundly influence so many people. How do we address those gaps in power?
Brenton, I love your question. I don't think we
just pop open another beer. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how to answer the question exactly, except to say that I think that we do humanity a disservice by not putting that into our equation of how we think about things. And I was really trying to just put that into our equation, because I think it's really easy to talk about the world and about people as if all people have the same, not just stakes, but power to make things happen, right? And I think it's too easy to talk about whether it's Iraqis and Americans or white people and people of color and just divide it that way. I'd actually like to start dividing it with this elite group of people, an uber elite group of people in mind who rule the world. and I mean that. And I think
and they're not just white, by the way.
Oh my God,
No.
please,
Oh my God.
please. Every
Everywhere.
country
Every
has
country has the
its
same.
elite people who are insulated from all of the workings of the day-to-day life, whatever, but not more than that, just have the resource of power. And I don't just mean pure power, I just mean power to make decisions that impact profound numbers of people. I just think that should be in our equations. And if it's in our equations, we have to think differently. About who are our enemies, who are our allies, what are our priorities, to go back to what you were saying, Basim.
And our enemies really are enemies.
I mean, I always say enemies and allies in quotes, but I just think to address it is just to put it into the equation. And I think we do ourselves a huge disservice thinking that the problems are just at the level of the masses of people.
Yeah, and I think what we were talking about earlier with elections here, comparing them to elections in the United States, I can compare them to elections in Haiti or in Colombia, wherever we want to go. But
can I just say something before you say that?
Yes, please.
This to me would be putting that kind of power into the equation. It would be actually less comparing U.S., Iraq, Haiti, Colombia, whatever, and comparing elections and no elections, because I don't think that elections are that much different than no elections. I really, because I think that it still winds up with elite people in power who have way more power than they know what to do with. They weren't prepared for it. I don't care what human you are on the planet, you are not prepared to have that level of power.
Well,
wait. So all I'm saying is, if we just stop comparing, and I'm not saying stop comparing, in addition to comparing the differences in systems across nations, just start thinking about the fact that ultimately people are controlled by a very small number of people making decisions. They have the power to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just imagine if we could just, the three of us right now, just decide how Iraq was going to go. Just the whole country. We're just going to make the decisions. I mean,
that's what's
what
happening.
would that mean?
So
right, exactly.
This is exactly what's happening.
I know. What would that
Just like us.
Right, exactly.
Listen, but so Sandkey too says, so would that be okay if we say corruption and poor governance hamper Iraq's ability to fight terror? And I say, yeah.
Yes.
No
What
question.
is
100%.
What's terror?
Well, terror.
No, I know. I'm not asking that question in the same rhetorical way. I'm so sorry, Sandkey too.
Yeah.
Certainly,
certainly corruption, but what is corruption is, exists when you don't have sort of deep structures of rules in place or laws, right? Which mean that, in order to get to Z, or Z, you say Z, I have to pass through, X and Y in order to get to Z. And it's like, I can't just go right to Z. And sometimes going through X and Y can be problematic, but you need that in order to make it impossible to just pass money and power along to people, very quickly, or who might be your cronies or something. And so, it's finding this balance of inside of a system of enough rules to sort of hold things in place, but not too many rules that it stifles the process of development and transformation.
Having checks and balances, this would be the best way to stop corruption. But corruption is there. It's only the level of corruption.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's corruption in the United States. We have corruption in Iraq, but the level in Iraq is...
It's much higher than in the United States, yeah.
I don't know how to measure that.
Oh my God.
I cannot stop talking about the corruption.
Okay.
And the joke about the Iraqi and the American?
Nope.
So the American said, you see this building? He said, yes. He said, well, I took 30 billion to build it, and I only spent 10. So the Iraqi looks around and said, do you see this building? He said, what building? He said, exactly, I took all money. This is a joke everybody knows. This is the level of corruption.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with 50% corruption. I'm happy.
And in the United States, we want to get it to zero. There's going to be corruption. The corruption is sort of rooted in place.
Yeah.
We see it, right? I mean, there's just I think what you're talking about, Laurie, is a corruption that's built so deeply embedded in the system that you can't even see it, because it's just about the way our entire tax structure is in place, or the way that you don't notice it, and the average ordinary person doesn't experience the corruption on the street. The police officer demanding a bribe, or the license plate. In order to get your license at the license bureau, you got to pass somebody a $50 bill.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see that kind of stuff, so we just imagine that things are more equitable and fair. But the truth is, the corruption is really deeply embedded, so deeply embedded. It's often not even corruption; it's just base or blatant inequality. Which is why, the child who grows up in a poor neighborhood is very unlikely to end up in a wealthy neighborhood, and the child in the wealthy neighborhood is very unlikely to end up here. Those things don't happen. So that's not corruption per se, but it's just a deep structure of inequality and injustice and unfairness. I guess I would say maybe it's just unfairness. And so here it plays itself out.
But I guess when I think of corruption, I think also just like the putting a price on everything. There is a kind of corruption. It's just corruption of the human spirit, of things that can't be bought and sold. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen all around the world, that we put prices on things, but there's such a almost sacredness to money, like that everything can be bought and sold. That to me, this is a kind of corruption that's architectural to our system.
Yeah.
Do you know? And so I don't know how to compare it. Just for me, it's hard to think that we're better, because I just see it differently than that.
Well, maybe this is a place to end.
Yeah.
Because
so.
Okay.
Well, we're at 7:37. Well,
that's good. No, that's good.
Maybe put some summarizing thoughts out.
Okay.
Go ahead, Laurie.
I would like to see an international. This is my final thought. I would like to see an international council of wise, sacred being, not sacred, of wise people who are above, who are, how can I say this? Who are groomed and tasked with making the difficult, they have to be consulted to make the difficult decisions on the planet. And so that there isn't just, you said checks and balances, but I'm not comfortable with them just being like in the system that we have, checks and balances that only get used under certain circumstances or can be hijacked in ways. This is like this untouchable council of wise people that always have to be consulted in the most on the most difficult issues, and they come from all over the world. And I don't know how they get into those positions, but that's what I mean. I want to see that. I'm working towards that.
Yeah, it would be cool. I like that.
Not
as a model.
Yeah, I know.
As a model of governance.
Yeah, but it's it's global.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear that.
Anyway, that's fine.
That's what the UN was supposed to do.
But did they have a spiritual component into it? Because I think it's. I know that has its own problems, but this is the dream.
Well, my dream. I have lived very good times in Iraq. Like we said, the 70s were the golden years of Iraq. So I lived in the 70s and I've seen the best days in Iraq. But for the young generation who were born in the 90s and the 80s, they have seen nothing but wars and corruption and everything. So for me, I want the young generation, like I say I'm proud to be Iraqis. The young generation, I'm not very proud to say that they are Iraqis. I wish for Iraq to get out of this corruption problem that is crippling the country.
Yeah.
And for the young generations to hold their heads up and say, I'm an Iraqi, to be proud of it. This is my wish.
And we're really happy to partner with you on bringing your wish into the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I'm thankful for the opportunity to see the humanity and the sociology of people around the world in so many interesting ways, in the interesting ways that I've been able to do that. And then I'm happy to meet people like you, Basim, who have a dream that I can be part of fulfilling. That's, I guess, my dream is that I continue to find ways to do that. Yeah. And to be smart enough to apply to Laurie's global
Council.
to be invited.
We're taking applications.
I'm afraid I probably won't get. All right. Hey, listen. Thanks. I don't know how many folks are left, but listen. Thanks for watching, and thanks.
Thank you so much
for participating. It's been nice.
Anybody who's thinking of coming to Iraq, you have my contacts, and I'm happy to see you.
Basim has a couple empty bedrooms.